welcome again to another edition of Beneath the Surface, where faith and reason meets. I am Paul Morano, and my guest tonight is Mr. John Tudoris. John, how are you?
Hello, happy day.
So we are going to be happying our day with chapter 3 of my latest published book, which is called Refuting the Nonsense and Reclaiming the Truth, One Socratic Dialogue at a Time. And basically, it's a book of dialogues that refute today's nonsensical philosophy, if you will. And later on in the book and later on in the series, we will be reclaiming the truth of the Catholic Christian faith. But right now, chapter 3 is what we're going to focus on tonight with John, and it focuses on ethical principles. And in a sense, it doesn't really focus on good or right ethical principles, John, as you read the chapter. It focuses on the ethical principles of the world today and how they are basically nonsensical and contradictory.
Very, very true and very well said. That's actually one of the reasons why I went back to school to study philosophy was the world was confusing. And I knew that the more I got a better handle on those who've considered all the questions and then some that people are asking now, and I've actually come up with really, really good answers.
Mm,
Uh, so I had that sense that better off would be, and I have to say, I'm not disappointed.
very good. And this book, I think, at least assists people today through the minefield of the nonsensical philosophy that undergirds secular humanism and secular progressive philosophy today, which we hear throughout the media, throughout the educational establishments, and other places throughout our entire society. So, John, chapter 3. First, just a general synopsis. What are your thoughts on that particular chapter?
Overall, I won't leave it at this, but I'll start with it was quite good in so much as that, as you mentioned, it aims to take a lot of the ethical under the big ethical questions that people put out today and say actually there is more clarity than you realize, and you just have to be willing to be humble. And by humble, I don't mean a kind of self-deprecation in a unnatural sense, which is what a lot of people end up getting. What I mean by humble um, is to be open to what is true, but as Fulton Sheen would say, borrowing from G.K. Chesterton, an open mind should be like an open mouth. It should clamp down what has something good to eat.
Yeah, so when you find truth, you can close your mouth and chew on it.
Exactly.
But before
Exactly.
before you do that, you want to keep your mouth open for some good nuggets.
That is amen to that, brother.
All right, so I understand that you took a key phrase or sentence in each one of these several dialogues, which is in this book, which matches that book on the screen. Why don't you start with the first?
Absolutely. And if it's okay with you, the I thought the opening line, which you had about ethical principles, was a really good one. So I'll kind of let that hang out there, and then maybe as we go along through each of these key points from these dialogues, maybe that sort of underpinning will be in some people's minds as they consider some of these very good meaty topics. So first, ethical principles, quote, are objective, consistent, and universal. That's why sinners tried to avoid them with ambiguity, diversion, and rationalization. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so objective, consistent, and universal. And that's, I think, really key right there.
So in other words, ethical principles are applied to everybody. They're
Yes.
not simply due to somebody's subjective experience.
Yes.
Whereas, yeah, well, we're going to find out how contradictory the world's mocking of ethical principles is.
Yeah.
So,
And the main reason why is we have a common human nature. The human nature that Socrates and Aristotle and the ancient Greeks, all the way up through the scholastics up to contemporary times right now to this moment, we have the exact same human nature and that which is universal, consistent, and objective.
Yeah, we all share in a human nature.
Exactly.
So the first one.
Yeah, first one, which I like your title. It's like a tongue twister. Judgmental judgments on judgmentalism. Uh, yeah, that's a good one. So in each of these here, I just went through. So your character, Sophia, of course, which is another word for wisdom. At some point in each of them had something where you could almost pick apart something really nice and meaty. So this one here is quote, "We cannot know the level of knowledge and free consent the person had when choosing the behaviors. Only God is privy to this."
Yeah, so basically Sophia, right before that, Sophia was telling him, again, Sophia is the sane one, the one that and of course in Greek it means wisdom. She was telling Richie that while we are not meant to judge persons, we are obligated to judge ideas and behaviors. And the reason why we're not able to judge persons is precisely what you just said. We're not privy to the amount of information that the person had while or before doing their act, and the degree of free consent that they had in doing it. So we always have to remember that those two elements of knowledge and consent with regard to the subjective acts of the person. However, as as uh, as Sophia continually tried to tell him, we have an obligation to judge actions and ideas and thoughts and words.
Yeah, very, very true. And I think the one of the key components that is missed when the thought of judgment comes is the fact that it's very integral to human reason. If we don't make judgments, we can't actually make decisions.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the three acts of the mind, according to Aristotle and the Thomistic tradition. Perception, apprehension, perception, and judgment.
Yeah,
We judge what is.
yeah, yeah.
We're not judging persons' souls, but we're judging what is good and evil, true and false, right and wrong, etc.
Right. And that goes to the comment from Sophia that and this is where humility comes into play is to recognize the limits that we have on our own intellect. Even the smartest of persons has this much ability, for those who can't see that zero, to actually read someone else's soul. Only God actually has that capacity. And so therefore it actually makes sense. It's very reasonable to say be careful about judging the state of another person's soul, because if you render that kind of judgment on them, the very sobering comment from Jesus, who is God and divine, is that we actually then invite that kind of judgment on our own soul.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Kind of like similar to, different but similar to what Jesus says in the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our
Yes.
trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Yeah.
Yes. That is a very sobering line.
All right. So what else you got?
Don't force your morality. So here's the meaty quote from Sophia. You can't stop people from forcing their morality by forcing your morality.
Yeah, that dialogue is basically it starts off with let's see, religious conservatives go too far. No one should force their morality on others. And Sophia simply says, that sounds like a moral principle. And Richie says, I guess so. And she says, or he, as Sophia, um, would you like to force that on others? In other words, Richie is forcing a moral principle, a moral precept on others, which is the precept we should never force our morality on others. So it's a contradiction in terms, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, very true. Very true. How can we have courts and judgments about upholding some sort of moral standard? I mean, don't steal. If I go and I steal my neighbor's TV, I should be rightly prosecuted if I'm caught.
Sure.
because that's a violation of their own property. What did G.K. Chesterton say? Is that the thief values the goods of others. The problem is they're not his.
And the funny thing is that we have to that is what civil law does.
Yeah.
It judges certain acts and behaviors as acceptable or unacceptable, lawful or unlawful for a particular people. That's what it does. If you do not impose moral standards on others, you have no law.
Yeah,
You have anarchy, chaos.
absolutely. Yeah, and there is, and I suppose it is worth noting that there is some kind of um, gray area in some areas on whether or not civil law should, uh, you know, be the standard bearer for, or rather, should be enforcing some sort of morality. For example, Thomas Aquinas somewhat famously thought that the civil law should actually not prosecute prostitution because it was so commonly violated that to do so would actually disrupt the social order. And rather, that kind of moral sin was best adjudicated basically in the confessional. So the
Yeah.
church, which would help promote a moral life, would actually be able to do that. And I suppose the other thought that comes to mind on that is Thomas Aquinas was also very good at um, gradating the nature of sin. So the more they were in accords with the nature of someone, even if it's a sin, the less severe it is. So something like prostitution, for example, is in some ways less bad than, let's say, pornography or masturbation, or even the worst was bestiality, because you get this further down scale away from what human nature and what the sex act is actually meant to be.
So there are gradations of violations of the natural law.
That's correct.
Yeah, and some perhaps should be unlawful because they are so unjust to the common good, whereas others not so much. And
Yes,
they should just be in the realm of personal morality, in which the
right.
government should not play a big part in.
Exactly. And not to get too far ahead, because it looks like that we'll actually be hitting on those very shortly. The next one, the imposition of non-imposition. So here's the quote from Sophia. Quote, you admittedly want to impose your personal belief that no one should impose their personal beliefs. Who are you to impose your personal beliefs on others?
Yeah, and it's the same contradictory beginning premise. No one should force their personal beliefs on others, which is a personal belief that no
Right.
one should impose their personal belief on others. So what Richie is saying is I get to impose my personal belief here, but no one else has to, no one else can, or at least, I mean, he gets. I think he by the end of the argument, he gets to admit at least Sophia points out to him that it's just the personal beliefs that go against yours that you're really against,
Yeah.
not
And
personal beliefs in general.
and I thought your opening epigraph, I don't know where you had gotten it from, but it was seemed to be key to the answer. And this is what it reads. Personal beliefs, not just morals, ought to be imposed if they are universal principles of justice.
Yeah.
Universal principles of justice.
Yes, justice is one major purpose for civil government. It's
Yeah,
pretty simple. I mean, a lot of people who are against abortion recognize what a grave injustice. This isn't just personal morality. This isn't just what happens in your bedroom kind of thing.
right.
It is a grave, I mean, if human beings begin at conception, it is a grave injustice against the very basic fundamental right of every human being, the right to life.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And there's so much of this. I wish we actually had a lot more time. I know our video has a time crunch. So,
Yes.
but this is we'll hit the next one. Sex is no exception. So Sophia's quote, Sexual union is not something you simply do, it's something you become.
Hmm. That one is at the crux of my philosophy of human sexuality and marriage. Taking the phrase "and they become one flesh" from the Book of Genesis, and it's not it doesn't have widespread agreement, but I'm in the process of writing a book that sort of explains or elaborates on this point. So when that comes out, I will let you know. But it's a very important point, I think. Extremely
Amen.
important, especially for today.
Yeah. The next one, the heading porn, free speech, or criminal injustice. And here's the quote from Sophia. Where in the Bible does it say lusting is a good thing and self abuse is a right? It
Well,
doesn't.
the presumption is that Richie, who Sophia is arguing with, is a Christian, is
Right.
and so basically Sophia is using his own faith on him, you know, saying what a contradiction this is with regard to your faith, but it's also a contradiction with regard to reason, as the this is kind of a long dialogue, but it unfolds in a way that it uncovers that this is not only personal, free, private behavior behind closed doors. This is something that is destroying the fabric of civilization.
Yeah, I agree. I wish we could go on that
And
one.
hence, and hence it's an
Yeah,
injustice. It's not just a personal point of personal morality. It's a
right.
grave injustice to the common good.
Yeah, I agree. There's what's that saying? There's no such thing as a private sin.
Yeah, but especially, I mean, it's like 2 clicks away from an 8-year-old seeing things that he or she should never see in their lifetime.
I agree.
It's so easy for children to get, and and adults just don't care.
Yeah.
They care more about their addictive lust than they do about the good and the innocence of children. It's really amazing if you stop to think about it.
Well, that goes to the old saying, sin makes you stupid or
Ugh,
blind. And what it does is that the lower powers of the lust actually cloud someone's sound judgment. Even if someone knows otherwise, it makes it very hard to choose the right thing when your lower powers are not ruled instead by wisdom.
yeah, yeah. And when they're ruling wisdom.
Right.
Yeah.
The next one we have, and just three more, so we'll try and hit them quick just to give people a nice little bit of flavor on this. Religion and politics. Quote,
Yeah.
your religious belief should not be affect public policy. Should this affect public policy?
Why don't you elaborate on that?
Well, just the idea that that someone is I think this was Richie here was basically saying someone's religious belief shouldn't affect public policy. When of course we know the years ago you and I did a beneath the service on this where we had a whole bunch of quotes from the early founding fathers of this nation where they're actually saying au contraire. The separation of church and state has nothing to do with the church affecting state. In fact, they said it's actually necessary because you need a guiding moral principle in order to make sound judgment as a ruling body. Rather, instead, it was to prevent the state from actually imposing its will on the church,
Right.
because then that would actually corrupt the nation from the inside out.
And again, like you said earlier, um, religious belief is throughout the law.
Yeah,
Stealing, stealing is the seventh commandment. That's a
yeah.
religious belief.
It's a religious belief and a
Slander,
natural belief.
yeah, slander, murder. All of these
Yeah,
things are each are one of the Ten Commandments. Religious beliefs, of course, religious beliefs are going to find their way into law because of what we said earlier, the principle of justice.
yeah. Next one, as long as he's happy. Quote, since we're all human and share a common human nature, happiness is fundamentally a state of being, not necessarily a feeling. And this got me a little excited. As you may know, my theology thesis contained a large component of happiness, and I wish I think you and I did a show on happiness at one point, but if you ever want to expand on that again, I would love to. But yeah, happiness is so underrated, and partly because it's so misrepresented as a this contemporary. I mean, what you put in there in that dialogue is exactly what I heard growing up from many parents who were afraid to impose a certain moral standard on their children. They said, I just want them to be happy. And I hate to say it, but what they're really saying effectively is, I just want them to be mediocre. Because that's
Yeah.
not true happiness. True happiness is the perfection of a soul. It's the perfection of a person and their potential coming to full actualization of who they really are. And that in itself is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's happiness is human flourishing, right?
Yeah.
It's fulfillment of our human nature to put it philosophically. Yeah, it's amazing how in the past couple of 300 years the words happy, uh, happiness, freedom, and rights have all been bastardized to become just subjective feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. All right. And let's go to our next one. We are at a good clip. So many of these. I Uh, maybe perhaps in the future we'll do a much deeper dive, but hopefully the listeners will get a and watchers will get a good little taste on all the good nuggets Paul has in his book.
In chapter
Next
three.
one in chapter three, ethical principles.
Yep.
Uh, the last little heading we have is loving the sinner and hating the sin. Quote, we don't have the ability to judge how much knowledge and free consent a person has at the time of his choosing the act. Only God is privy to that information of how culpable he may be.
Now that relates to what we were talking about earlier
Yeah,
with knowledge and freedom. Um, and this is one that is difficult for post-Eden humans, as I call them, all of us after original sin. And that is a lot of people either, hate the sinner and hate the sin, or love the sinner and love the sin. It's very difficult for a lot of people to separate the sinner from the sin, the person from the act. And that's exactly what we believe Christ calls us to love the sinner and hate the sin. In fact, in a nutshell, if you're not hating the sin, you're not loving the sinner.
yeah, I that's right. What the highest definition of love, which the church recognizes, is to will the good of the other. Well, willing here doesn't just mean a like a wishful thinking, as some might think. Willing here actually is the actual act of doing it. So the intellect recognizes the good. So the good here is someone is doing something wrong, and then basically saying the will here is to saying, hey, I want for your betterment. I don't know if you realize this, but if you keep continuing to do this particular thing that you're doing, or if you do this one particular item, it will have irreparable harm to one
Yeah,
degree or another on your life and the lives of others. Now, obviously, not every person is in the situation to do so, right? Everything is according to your relationship with others. It's, for example, everyone's probably heard the term "don't be a Karen," right?
okay.
So it's not our job to call out every single person, but according to our relationship and as well as our capacity. Some people aren't very good speakers. Some people can't write very well, but some people can. Some people do have a public voice, and 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 if there is for example, if there is some sort of public sin of some sort, those who are in the that right kind of media to call it out ought to do so and appropriately, because they have that honed skill set. That's why the press, freedom of the press is actually very important freedom
Yeah.
that we have in this country, and why it's there to quite frankly, check the corruption in the government and
Yeah,
other areas,
yeah. I mean, tr
among other things.
truth is just it's you have to have truth, and you have to have clarity. Two things that are very much missing, especially clarity in our day and age. But I also want to mention the fact that it says love the sinner and hate the sin in this last dialogue. You don't have to like the sinner. I think a lot of people thinking, how
Yes,
can he's this person is very unlikable. No one's asking you to like the sinner, and certainly
right,
they're not asking you to like the sin. They're
right.
asking you to hate the sin and to love the sinner. Tell really quickly in just a few seconds, tell us the difference between liking somebody and loving somebody.
Liking someone could just be affection, for example. You know, I like my dog, but does my dog really, really love me the way a human can love? No, because they don't have free will. They can't actually will the good of the other.
Yeah.
But so you can have affection. You can like something. I like blueberry pie, but I
Yeah.
really can't love blueberry pie.
So
Blueberry pie can't reciprocate, you know?
so loving is something that is in the true sense of the word, it's something that is only exchanged by persons.
That's right.
Yeah, because it's to will, which is free, to use your free will to will the good of the other. And what is the ultimate good of the other? Their salvation, right?
Oh, absolutely. Coming to the fullness of perfection.
Yeah,
I mean,
so to somebody who does evil things a lot of the
yeah,
time, maybe loving takes the shape of praying for their souls, hoping that they convert and
yeah,
repent and see the light. And a lot of people have after a
yeah.
lifetime of doing evil.
Very, very true. And I think that's a good spot to leave it on for that, because now to finish it up, out of your ending questions to ponder, I picked a couple.
Which happens to
Um,
be on page 51 if you're looking looking on with us.
for those following at home, page
Yes.
51. All right, questions to ponder. So I chose number 1 and 5 to highlight.
All right, let's do it.
Question number 1, is it logically consistent for a person to be judgmental in condemning people he sees as judgmental?
Good question. What do you think?
No.
Good answer. Good answer. How can you be?
But it's so tempting to. I think oftentimes because we don't realize how short-sighted we are as people. I mean, think about it. We get up on the wrong side of the bed in the morning. We didn't have our coffee, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and maybe just someone cut you off in traffic, whatever it is, and you're just not on your game, if you will. So, but
No question. It
yeah.
takes virtue. It takes virtue and it takes patience and prayer.
Yes, that's right. Very
Yep.
much true. That's virtue, which is the habitual act of doing the good.
And the other question, by the way, what we're doing is we're at the end of at the end of each chapter, there are questions to ponder with regard to the chapter just read. So that was question one. What question do you want to hit now?
And this one we'll leave, and just a little time check. We got 3 minutes on our marker here,
Okay.
so we are doing quite
All right.
well. Uh, which is question number 5.
Okay.
This is my favorite, of course, because it's about happiness. So
Mm.
the question is, why is happiness a dangerous marker today for judging what is good and beneficial for people?
Great question. And this of course speaks to the very title of the dialogue. So how would you answer that question? Why isn't happiness a good indicator or a good measure?
Because the happiness that most people think of is shallow,
Yeah.
and it's not. Uh, it doesn't hit at the truly substantial understanding of happiness. Think about it. When we have our Declaration of Independence and they talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I remember when I first started thinking about that. Why are they talking about happiness, this sort of frivolous thing? That a little smiley face on a chart. Little did I realize that the composers, including of our founding documents, including Thomas Jefferson, which I understand had a heavy hand on the Declaration of Independence, were classically trained, and they understood that
Yeah.
happiness itself was not just a frivolous thing, but the
Yeah.
pursuit of happiness, which Aristotle says can be not attained in this life, but is
Yeah.
important to pursue because we are far better off, and it's the only thing we cannot not desire in this life.
Everybody desires happiness.
We
Yeah.
do. We
Yeah.
do. And so why not pursue the best version of
And
happiness?
I'll just add to this just for food for thought. One can be happy and not feel happy.
Yes.
And one can feel happy and not be happy. I
Yes.
want everybody to ponder that. That's a very important thing. And if you want to delve into that a little more, get the
Uh,
book. Get
that's
the
it.
book.
That's that's it. We have a
It's
little
called
less than a
Refuting the
minute.
Nonsense.
So if you want to
Yeah.
wrap up, it's all yours.
Well, the book is called Refuting the Nonsense and Reclaiming the Truth, One Socratic Dialogue at a Time. Just get it on Amazon. Look up the title or my name, and I highly recommend it, especially for people who are seeking the truth and the way to combat the ways of the world today. Thank you, Mr. John Tudors, for that skimming, but an important skimming above the surface on chapter 3 of my latest book. Thanks a lot, and I hope you have a good night. Thanks for joining us, John.
Glad to be here.
And thank you for joining us, everybody. Join us next time for episode number 4 of Refuting the Nonsense and Reclaiming the Truth. God bless.